What's up, gamers? Welcome to Battle Mallet Podcast, Episode 16, Shades of Amber. The Battle Mallet Podcast is a podcast delving into the minds of four busy gamers, their annual journey to the Nova Open Convention, playing games that they love, and balancing life with those games. I'm Jerod Johnson, and I'm here with Trace Hyde.
I am not a champion of the Beastgrave yet.
And Jason Table Dude Murray.
Going dog.
Well played, sir. And so in this episode, we're kind of go wild, be on the hunt, maybe be on the grim watch for looking to despoil Beastgrave.
So that was a lot of words together.
Yeah. So focus is going to be on Warhammer Underworlds. This episode, we're hoping to talk about, what it's been like and what our hopes are going forward, growing the community. We want to give you our first impressions of Beastgrave now that 3 warbands have been released and we've all had some chances to get some games in, and we hope to wrap up with a kind of a tactic session on how you make decisions as the game has changed. So before we get into all of that, though, what's everybody been up to? Trace?
I have been painting a little bit. Played a little bit. I've played a few weeks here and there with Jason on and off. Not a whole lot of Underworlds. It's been kind of a little bit of a lull period for me as far as gaming goes. Just, trying to chill out a little bit. And some of that comes with the whole balancing life with games thing. Because my sister was living with us for a little while, and so she was kind of in the space that I normally would game in, paint in, stuff like that. And so kind of changed the dynamic of what time I had available and stuff like that. But now she's moved out, and so things can kind of hopefully get back into a rhythm again.
Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, essentially.
It's too early, Jason.
Damn.
No, she moved into a new apartment. She's living on her own now. She just kind of stayed with us for a little while to save up a little bit of money to get, to get a little cushion. So we're happy to help her do that. And I started my fun little, it's not little. There's a lot. I started my, Demons of the Ruinstorm project. So all of my demons will be painted kind of like the Forge World Ruinstorm demons that they released a few weeks ago. Just a really cool painting concept, I thought, and it's turning out good. So that's what I've been up to.
What about that board, yo?
The what?
Yeah, your display board.
I did make a fancy schmancy Warhammer display board. I took one of the magnetized boards that we got at Nova last year and kind of put a coat of black spray paint on it and did some fun little airbrush designs and got a neat vinyl sticker that's fashioned after the symbol on the interior cover of the Demon's book. And I put it across the front of the tray and I sealed it all with resin. And it turned out really, really cool. I was really pleased with it. It's not quite as magnetized as it was. Doesn't work quite as well, but that's okay. How
was it working with that clear resin?
It doesn't stick quite as well, but like when you have them on there, like they don't shift around, but I would never, ever, ever turn it upside down or like even real cocked to the side. Like
it's talking about like pouring it and stuff like what do? You cook it up on the stovetop? Like how does that work?
No, so it's a 2-part epoxy. And you can get it at Michael's. Like the one I got it was at Michael's. And you just basically take the equal parts, like you have to measure it out. I probably should have gotten a scale like that you zero out to get it exactly the right ratio. But
Wait,
basically,
you just didn't like hold it in your hand and stand on the scale and subtract your weight minus what's that? That's not how you balanced it out.
I don't think he was making that much resin.
Oh, okay.
it's not. Yeah, I didn't need all that. But it was a lot of fun. It was definitely an experiment and changing up of like flexing of different hobby muscles. So that was nice. And it turned out really good. I was really surprised by how easy but stressful it was.
That's awesome.
Because like you've done all this work on this thing and then you're just basically pouring chemistry over top of it and you have no idea what's going to happen. So it was cool though. Yeah. How about you, Jason? What you been up to?
Well, before we get to that, I want to encourage you to put some pictures up on the socials.
Oh, I will.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
I will.
So now, Jason, what have you been up to?
Well, as the intro led to, I've gone dark in the ways of Call of Duty has me again. I was out of video games for a very long time, playing only sporadically. But Modern Warfare was one of my all-time favorite games, and my brother encouraged me to get this one, and darn him, oh darn him. So, this weekend was really spent playing a lot of Call of Duty, probably way too much Call of Duty. I am not a spring chicken anymore, so staying up till 4:30 in the morning and then getting up at 6 with the kids, let me tell you, it does not work well.
Yeah, that's rough.
So I have a question for you, Jason.
Yes.
Is it worth it? Because like it's gotten really bad reviews.
I mean, I don't play single player, so I only play multiplayer. I am not as good as I once was. I have definitely aged in my stick skills, but I'm really enjoying it. I think I'm like level 26 or whatever. I haven't seen too much cheese, so it is very, very similar to the original. Like, there's a lot of weapon customization, but the kill streaks and the perks and stuff don't, in my opinion, at this time, don't really dominate the game. And there's not all that goofy jumping and stuff that it's been in there. So for me, yes, like I will continue to play it until it gets cheesy, which I'm sure it will at some point. But the single player, don't ask me, because I probably will touch the single player about 6 years from now. So,
well, I think really I guess my question is more along the lines of like I've just read that it's not stable and like it crashes your console and stuff a lot. So I just was curious because I've potentially considered getting it because I knew that you'd be on and some of the guys from Morganton are actually playing it. So I was like, well, maybe I could get on here and do this thing. But
other than night one, so like Thursday, it came out on a Friday, but you could get it at 9 o'clock on Thursday. At 9 o'clock on Thursday, it was horrific to get on. Like it really, really was. Since that time, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, right? So I have not had any issues whatsoever.
All right. Well, I might procure it and potentially play with you later.
Okay.
You guys have fun with that.
It's a whole separate experience.
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea.
First person shooters are not my thing. Other than I guess Destiny. That was the only one that
you like some first person shooters. You just don't. I mean, and there was a little time in there where you were pretty into Destiny PvP. So
yeah, that's true. Fair enough.
Same kind of thing, just not the same.
I think maybe it's the Call of Duty. Like, I just want to be a space wizard, and I can't do that in Call of Duty. So,
not yet.
Not yet. When that happens, you guys let me know.
You can do it in Fortnite. Just kidding.
I mean, I'm sure I can. I don't want to play Fortnite.
Yeah,
you're a smart man.
Yeah.
Those video games, though. I mean, other than video games, I've been playing some Beastgrave, definitely working on a few decks here or there. I've stopped into Dark Bunny Creatives 2 or 3 times now to check on the project and chat with the guys.
How's it looking?
It's looking real good. I dropped off 4 additional warbands, so when the project's said and done, there will literally be no Underworlds model that has not been painted.
That's awesome.
Like I handed over Steel Hearts, Reavers, the Rats, and something else. Oh, Farstriders. Really, really pleased with the way that the Stormcast models are turning out. They have this Templar look, but with a purple hue, purple robes and stuff, which I'm a huge fan of purple.
Yep.
The corn stuff I'll leave for the pictures or anyone that gets a chance to play me. They kind of Val kind of set it out so like all the ghosts look the same. That being the Lady Mournful and the Thorns, all the Stormcasts look the same. So he's trying to like pair groups together. So the Beastmen, Magors, and the Reavers are all going to have a very similar theme. And I may buy another set of Godsworn Hunt and get them in there at some point because I'm really, really happy with the way that it's coming out.
Cool.
All I have to say is God of War. So.
Oh, nice.
I'm excited to get the project back. Other than that, I have made it to quite a few game nights trying to spark the community here in Raleigh area, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But with that, I only have 3 warbands to play, so I've been playing a lot of Gits, a lot of Eisenine, and some Godsworn here and there. So,
how's that been working out for you?
I don't know, Trace. How have my Gits been going?
I think you're just to the point now where like you just understand the game, and it's not like anything that you're doing intentionally. It's just natural choices that you're making because you understand how the game works. But you're like it's legit.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that because like there's a point that I want to drive home about Beastgrave when we start to get into that. But yeah, like I selected Gits as my kind of warband for the start of Beastgrave, thinking that when there's 9 fighters on the board, there would be something for the other team to interact and kill. In some cases, it has. Like, I mean, Steven gave me a run for my money with the Profiteers and actually won by holding objectives at the end. So, it's not all like it's not like I've apexed and turned into Jimmy or Amon or Max or JD. So I'm still got a lot to learn, but it has not turned out the way that I had envisioned. So we will be making some changes on that. So Jerod, you?
So super busy. I spent 6 days in Sweden for work. But while I was over there, got to do 2 cool things. So one, the Stockholm Warhammer store was celebrating its 20th anniversary. So I popped my head in there and, just kind of checked out what they had going on in their store. They've got 2 just gorgeous displays set up in their front windows. So the store is like on a sidewalk, like on a downtown street. So it's not your typical like American Games Workshop store that is in like some strip mall that no one ever sees.
Hidden in a hole.
In a corner of shame.
Yeah. So I mean, there were legitimately people walking down the street and they would stop and look at the miniatures that were in the display windows and were taking pictures of the miniatures. So it was really cool to see that in action. And while I was there, they actually had a couple of the heavy metal painters in the store for the anniversary. So they had flown in for the day. And one was Anya, and I cannot remember her last name, but Trace, you would get a kick out of this. She basically painted at least one version of all of the greater demons that are on the boxes, and she painted Archaon. for the boxes. so that was the work that she did. And I was talking to her and Max, who was the other painter there, and asking them, what's the favorite thing you've painted, and they said they have a hard time saying what the favorite thing that they've painted is, because they paint so far in advance. So sometimes they forget what they painted, or they forget the name of what they painted, or the thing that they've been working on for 6 months is something that's not going to be released for another year. Mm-hmm. So it's hard for them to call something out. But they had brought some of the miniatures that they had painted in, and they were in the display cases in the store. So that was really cool. And then the other thing that I got to do was I met up with the creator of yet another Warhammer Underworlds database. So yawudb.com to actually play a game of Underworlds while I was in Stockholm. So
that's cool.
So it's cool. So I played against his Grimwatch with my Yiltharis, because if I was going to get a game in a foreign country, I wanted to make sure that I was playing with painted miniatures, and it didn't seem like the Orcs or the Farstriders were going to be the way to go. And I have not done as much progress on my Beastgrave warbands as I would have liked. So got a game in with him over lunch, which was cool to hear him, talk about starting yawudb.com. I don't even know how you would try to shorten that. Yawudb. Yeah. And talking about the local community and them getting games in and stuff. So, and then I think since our last recording, I've made it to one of the local game nights. But I was talking with Trace today and kind of really looking for something to give me a kick in the keister as far as hobby progress is concerned. And I think that I have broken down, and Trace and I are going to split the Feast of Bones box, and we're going to play through the story. But we committed. It's on record because it's been typed. I think we're committed that we're not going to play until everything in the box is painted.
But we need to put a timestamp on that so that
we need a timestamp on it too. But I think just the fact that I'm not going to be allowed to play the minis until they're painted, will be what'll do it for me. That's what I did. Gosh, was it 4 years ago for the Lizards? As I just committed that I wasn't going to play anything that wasn't painted.
It was longer than that.
Gosh, time. Yeah, because Age of Sigmar is 3 years old, right?
Yep.
Ugh. Yep. So,
man, I'm surprised. I thought you were gonna hold out, but
yeah, did you really think that, Jason?
I did. Danny has the most willpower, right? We've established that. But when it comes to buying armies, it takes a lot for you to jump in.
Yeah.
Well, and I
get the rules.
I called it. I was like, this is Jerod's playstyle.
Yeah. It's so the way that the army can be set up is almost exactly the way that I used to play my Lizards back in Fantasy. So blocks of elite infantry that are durable, which is what just their frontline minis are, and then supported by strong magic and some supplemental shooting, with options for either heavy infantry or super heavy hitters. So it'll I think it'll be more of what I want to play and more fun for me than what the Lizards were, which is why the Lizards went.
And what about the Stormcast?
So I'm going to keep them. I think they're a fun project. I enjoy painting them, and so I'll just expand as things make sense. So because I haven't invested a ton in the Stormcast anyway, so it's not like there's a lot. It's not like there's a lot of sunk costs there. So
that's awesome. And Trace is already buying another army, so he cleans out one, puts two back in.
Yep.
Not true. I have everything out for display to get rid of everything else. So
Just so you know, it's on record that 10 months ago you said everything was going away.
no, I said all the 40K stuff was going away.
Yeah, you did 10 months ago.
He didn't say when. There was no time.
I didn't. I did not put a timetable on myself, did I?
You did not. Just funny.
Yeah, and then our stalwart companion Danny is not with us this week. He lost his mind and decided to buy a house. I don't know who would do that. Seems crazy.
See, these kids, they get married, then they buy houses.
Oh,
You all know what comes after that. Oh, geez, Louise, what's happening?
I don't know. People are playing Call of Duty.
Oh, I'm regressing. He's actually moving forward.
Yeah, right. Well, it's like a balance thing, right? There's always a balance in the Force or something.
Always.
So,
Oh, I did forget to mention that, I picked up the additional set of baddies for Blackstone Fortress and the cards, which Randall says good luck trying to win. So,
well, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, we need that.
I mean, I can imagine. I'm not looking forward to facing a block of 14 Trader card. That doesn't sound like easy mode to me.
Well, we also have the other cards too. We have the Advanced Arsenal because I got those a while back. The Advanced Arsenal and something Peril. I can't remember.
I don't know.
So we have lots of new things that we have not experienced.
Yep. Sweet.
Yep. And you're buying Bone Reapers, and the Slaves of Darkness book comes out next month. We might get distracted again.
Who knows?
Hey, Jason, you want some Chaos Warriors?
No, I don't want any. No, I want only new models.
I don't think you're going to get new models other than what you got.
And I guess I ain't buying Sleeves of Darkness, am I?
Nope. Guess not.
Yes, not.
All right.
Yes, you will.
Well, why don't we break here and we'll come back in just a bit and talking about growing the local gaming community.
And we're back. So in this segment, we want to talk about growing the Underworlds community in your local community. So we hinted at it in the intro. Jerod was over in foreign countries talking about people growing their community and what their local community was, and then Trace and I were back home here trying to show up to as many Underworlds nights as we could at our local shop in Game Theory. So, with the launch of Beastgrave, a lot of new players coming in, and just want to have a conversation about that. Like, what are our plans here locally in Raleigh, and then what can other people do to grow the game with it being a new season? So, I mean, Jerod, did you glean anything from the community over there on what they do to drive?
So it sounded like a lot of what they do is they'll try to get like coworkers involved. So that they can play like during lunch or, right after work or whatever. And then what happens from there is that you get these groups of people that all work together, or these, it might just be like a pair of people that work together that then get connected to other players for, like larger events for tournaments and things. But Ole, who's the creator, the gentleman that I got the chance to play with, says that he and the people that he plays with are running into a lot of the same kinds of issues that we personally are, where, they're trying to balance, having, a good relationship with their significant other, or, raising children, or both, or work. So that's one of the reasons that they've been drawn to the game, is that it is short, that you can get, a good experience in 45 minutes. So I mean, that's
Unless you're playing with Jason.
well, then is it?
Then it's what, like an hour and 15 minutes?
Yeah. Something like that. That's
Right.
only if you and I get talking.
Right.
But
No, I was just referring to Jason just being an expert at the game now.
oh, but he's done with all of his activations in like 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, he's a pro.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
So, I will say this. So the last time I was able to go to an event locally, an event being like a game night, I took the Condemners, and it was really interesting feeling like I was more or less on my back foot the whole time. But on the flip side, I felt like it gave a good experience to the people that I was playing with.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are here in the local area, is trying to provide a good experience. And we were hinting at it in the opening segment of like why I was selecting Gits. Not that that's working out, but you bring up a good point with the Condemners. Like, they're hard to, because they're a 3-fighter warband, right? So they're going to be a little bit more difficult to get going. And then the way the game is changing, they're not top tier, right? But you want that interaction with the other player, and that's like, the thought behind the Gits was there's 9 models, you're going to kill something, and that has not worked out. Like, it's almost like Trace pointed out to me last week or 2 weeks ago when we played, is that it's a little intimidating for the new players. But we have had really good success with, the new people showing up. Of the best thing that I think about Beastgrave for getting new people in is play the faction cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Jerod, you and I taught somebody the game, and you played Wild Hunt and he played Despoilers. And then the same thing happened the following week where Trace played Wild Hunt, and I helped Adam play the spoilers again. And the beauty of having, and you could even use the Dreadfane warbands at this point, having 12 objective cards, 10 gambits, and 10 upgrades, and you just learn the basics of the game. And I have to hand it to both of you. You guys, like Jerod, you in your game specifically, you showed every aspect of the game. And yes, your rolling was a little bit crazy.
Yeah. Is in spite of my really good luck that I think I gave a decent play experience.
Yeah, and I mean, Trace did the same thing. Like, you maybe didn't make the suboptimal movements, but you allowed those movements or actions to showcase all the elements of the game. And Adam's showing up now on a weekly basis, so I think it's worked there.
Sweet.
I guess I just need to learn how to lose, right? That's my problem.
I think that you've spent so much time, so long losing, that you've forgotten like how now. You win 1 or 2 times and it just all gets washed away.
Yeah, see, it's just my problem.
Yeah.
Well, just like I was telling you the other day, it's not that like you're doing anything that's inherently like cheesy or anything like that. It's just you almost all the time that you've played Underworlds, you've played with large model warbands, like large count warbands. So you're very used to being like, okay, like I can throw this guy out there and just be expendable, and I'm not going to lose any sleep about it. But that person who's across the table from you, they think that they've scored a victory, and all they're doing is playing into your plan. It's not because you're just used to playing that way. And the thing that I noticed with playing against the Gits was just that even all the work that I might be able to do, there's always somebody that can still unravel my plan left, because unless I've killed 8 of the 9 people,
Yeah.
there's a threat that can like, and you don't have to, like, I'm not talking about threat to kill me, but like threat to just disrupt what I'm doing, you know? So it's just, you just, your brain works that way, and it's not a bad thing. And it's really, I don't play large model warbands very often, if at all. So just trying to adapt my thinking from going from a very aggressive play style, which is what I've traditionally always played, to playing more objective focus, which we'll get into shortly, is, it's a change. So it's naturally a little bit harder for me to adjust my thinking to kind of play chess when I was playing like, chess, wizard's chess earlier, where you're literally removing models from the board. So it's just different.
Yeah, and I think, not to spoil the next segment on what has changed in Beastgrave, but I think it resonates here with what I'm struggling with is the game has shifted to a real movement game, right? So like with the large warbands, all the push cards, like you have to set up your actions, and it's really like played into this movement. And like you say, like I'll basically bait a fighter out, or I'll put somebody in a vulnerable position, hoping that people bite, or maybe they don't bite, which then burns one of their activations, and it's all this kind of like this mind game, which is based around positioning and movement. And that's the depth of the game that has come out, and that's what I need to kind of pull back on as we grow this community, because that's really the mode that I'm in now, is growing the Raleigh community back up. Like we've been lucky over the last 2 years of this this game to basically average between 6 and 14 players on a pretty consistent basis. But here with Beastgrave, like, yeah, we spiked up to 8 the first week. But I've noticed like we're basically, if the 3 of us don't show up, the number is like halved. So like they're running like 3 people on the weeks that we can't go. And as all of our listeners are well aware, like we show up maybe once a month, once every other week if we're lucky. So, Trace and I were talking, and I think we're going to take the show on the road. So what that means is I put up a poll. Yeah, right. Have models and dice will travel.
Yep.
Put up a poll on the Warhammer Underworld's NC page to see what night of the week worked. I was kind of hoping that it was going to be a Friday night or a Saturday night, but it appears that Thursday is the second night that most people that are on the page currently can play. So we'll still do the weekly or bi-weekly events at Game Theory to support Brandon in that shop by like that being the solid player foundation. But really the plan here is just to post community meetups. So for anyone listening to this, the first one will be the 14th of November, and looking at moving shops, and I'm split. I have to talk and get approval from either shops. But right now I'm thinking Gamers Armory, only because we know we have players in a local town, Sanford, which is a little easier to commute to Gamers Armory than all the way up into Raleigh, especially around that rush hour time frame. So thinking about that on the 14th, we'll get that up on the Facebook page. But really going forward from that, it's a monthly event, most likely on Thursdays, and getting everybody together, whether that's at Atomic, which is out in Durham, whether that's at the GW store up there in Raleigh, Pinecrest Point. Yeah. Or maybe even heading to Fayetteville or out to Greensboro on certain nights. But yeah, like I'm excited for that. It's trying to engage people on social media. But with that, we're going to have to make some tough choices, because there are other events that are going on in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, which we probably could make. But we all know that marriage equity is thin, and we can't make every event. So, I think right now we'll focus locally by doing that. And, I have some plans that maybe we don't even go to a shop. There's a ton of really good bars here in Raleigh, and maybe we do a meetup at a bar. So that's kind of how, we talked about it. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but we definitely had a long conversation the other day about it. So.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And, just as I think about playing the game, there's the part of me that wants to go to these events and try to, win glass or place so that I can get the cool swag and get all the accolades and everything. It was certainly, a temptation to try to get down to
Mace.
Well, to Mace, but before the one in Texas at the
Citadel.
Yeah, and then so I got back from Sweden this past Thursday, and over the weekend was the skirmish at Bugman's and the Grand Clash at Warhammer World, and so there was a part of me that was tempted to try to figure out how to stay in Europe for 3 more days. But quickly realized that was not even remotely an option. But that draw is there. Like, I want to be able to go to these events, and it's especially hard right after Nova, after having such a good experience there. But when I really think about it, what I really want is more people to play the game with on a more consistent basis. And that means potentially not going to these events and doing like we've talked about, where we're showing up at different shops and scheduling meetups with local players so that, they can get more reps in, they can learn the game more, they can, introduce their friends and, build a solid foundation, in the kind of greater Triangle area.
Yep.
Yeah, and building the game is, to me, it lives at a once a month type of game. Like, right. If 40K, because you play one game and it takes 3 to 4 hours, you can play that every single week with a different opponent and have a different experience. But, what I'm going to try to sell on the local groups is, this is a game that, one, if you can make it to a shop, there are other avenues to play from a digital standpoint. And 2, it scratches all the itches of a very in-depth tactical game that you can play in 45 minutes or an hour and 15 if you play me. But if you were to show up at the shop every single week, like, you guys know, so let's say you're playing, I don't know, Profiteers, right? And you're grinding every single week to make it the best Profiteer deck that you possibly can, and you only have the same 4 or 5 people that show up, you're going to play those 4 or 5 people probably every week, and it can really stale out the game quickly if you're playing 4 or 5 times. Like, not everybody's like us that likes to play, 3 or 4 times a week. So I think the monthly meetups, not a tournament where people can just come try stuff out, is kind of where the game has to live locally. And then you have your tournament.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
Trace, you don't play as much as Jerod and I. Is that appealing to you to play once a month, that way it doesn't become stale?
Well, and so and I learned this about myself this past year, right? The game does scratch that competitive itch, and because of that, there is a drive in me to be a win at all costs kind of player, just because of the nature of the game. And so the best way that I can kind of stymie that is to kind of just chill and not play all the time, because if I play all the time, my brain just starts working overdrive all the time. Now, prepping for Nova or something like that, that's a different thing entirely, because going in hoping to, do the best that you can. But like the best way that I can think of to kind of curb that enthusiasm on my part is to play less frequently. And I do agree, like playing against the same people all the time, it's not that I don't enjoy playing you guys. I love playing against you guys. It's just that we get predictable. Like you just get to the point where like you know a lot about what that person's going to do, and I feel like in the end it can potentially like hamper your overall game growth because you get so used to playing one thing and you think that that's what the game is, and that's not really the truth of it. Like it's Jason's play style or it's Jerod's play style. Not that it's bad, it's just that's your play style. And so naturally we kind of gear ourselves to prep for that, not countering against each other, but like we just learn to expect those things, and that may not be truthfully what the overall, I'm not a huge fan of the word meta, but that's what the meta is, right? Whatever the true meta is maybe different than what we're playing at a local level. If that makes any sense.
No,
that was a really long tirade. So.
It makes perfect sense. And, the best example that we could use for that for our listeners would be Jerod's Farstriders. Yeah. Like Jerod's denial Farstriders that he played at the end of season 1 into season 2, like both Trace and I, we found ways around that, right? But that necessarily wasn't a very broad play style.
Right.
Yeah.
So we think something's powerful, and then it's not, which is, on the reverse, why I love this game so much. Like, I need a game to fully immerse myself in. I just need to find a way to dial it back. So, and I'm trying, and I'm terrible at it.
It's not that you're bad at it. It's just that you just naturally understand the game. Like, it's not a negative. I don't want you to ever think it's a negative, because whoever plays against you learns something.
Yeah, but it's so like, I mean, the game that I had last week, I played Eyes of the Nine, 24 cards, spell heavy with like multiple objectives where I had to cast like 4 spells in a turn. It wasn't an efficient deck, right? It's not something that you could play. But to me, when I made it, it was like, oh, I'm really going to have to work at it. So then when I'm in the game across from an opponent that isn't as familiar with the overall mechanics, I'm grinding away to get the deck to fire. And like, because they're making mistakes, typically I can get to that point where it fires, and then it snowballs and it just turns into an experience that I don't want to create. But in my mind, it's like, this is terrible. This is so cool that it's working. Like, keep going. And
Well, I think one thing that you just need to remember for yourself too is that like a negative play experience is not always your fault. Like you might be doing everything that you can to make sure that other person has an interactive experience, but if they make bad decisions, or if they just don't understand what you're doing, there's nothing that you can do about that. That's all. Like, the game is played by 2 people. Like you and I might get heated with each other, but at the end of the day, like, I understand that in 15 minutes this will all be over, and then we'll just re-rack and do it again. But like, some people, they may be trying way harder, and they may just not have the same fundamental understanding as you. And so if they want to get better and they truly want to learn, then from my perspective, that person should ask questions like, what should I do differently? Because clearly what I'm doing is not working, right? So there's a level of ownness on the other person too.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's what I mean, kind of blossomed all of our friendships. Like my favorite thing is to, we're joking about the hour and 15 minutes, but is to get on to with one of you guys. We play a 35 minute game of Underworlds, and then we spend the next 2 hours dissecting every single thing that we did wrong. Now, when you're going into Nova, we learned you can't focus on your mistakes, but to enjoy the company of your opponent, especially the way that we enjoy hanging out with each other, like that is my favorite part of the game. And there are some people out there that don't want to engage in that part. So
no, but that should never make you feel like you've done something wrong. Like don't put that on yourself. It's a 2-player game, and I am guilty. I do get salty, but it's not anything that you've done. I might react to a play that you made only because it's a great play, and that's the only at the end of the game I will tell you that was an awesome play. Like in the moment, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm gonna get myself out of the situation that I'm in. I just think that we all have, anybody who plays this game for a long period of time has a competitive edge to them. Like you can play it casually, and learning to do that is basically they've made that so much easier this edition by just giving you the faction cards, right? If I want to play a deck casual, I just pick out all the faction cards and go play with those. And it's a fun challenge, right? Like you try and figure out ways to win against somebody who may have their deck dialed in, or somebody who's just learning, or they might say that they're just learning and they're really just practicing and trying to keep your, get your guard down. It's just there's a bunch of different factors, but yeah.
Yep. Well, I'll say this. I think, Jason, your orcs are painted.
Right.
There's a legit deck that did really good.
Actually got to place 12th before the cut at the SoCal Open. So
yeah, and I won't go in and say that season 1 are underpowered. I think you just have to work hard at season 1, and that's what my fear is because it has crossed my mind to go back to season 1 warbands. My orcs have never seen a legitimate game. We've played a lot of fun games with them, as like the Giant and stuff like that. But the thought has crossed my mind. But I think it goes back to, okay, this is not an efficient deck, so I'm going to grind away. And we do know, I've played a lot of games in Beastgrave, and one thing that I can say, the nice thing about small warbands and 4 wound fighters is they matter now. If you have extra defense and you have 4 to 5 wounds, you have to grind through them. There are a few warbands that can dispatch them easily, but
the pool of warbands is so much more broad now. It's not an easy thing to try and predict what you're going to be playing against unless you know that you're going to come across a 7 fighter warband or a larger warband now, because they're just so much more prevalent. So those you're not planning as much for those smaller warbands like your Magor's Fiends or something like that. They're not as popular and not as prevalent. So if somebody comes across you, if you come across somebody who's playing those, you're like, oh shit, well how do I handle this now? Because you don't prep for it, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think that just to close on the growing the community. So I think that we're all planning on going to the GW is having a little tournament of 8 people. I know that I plan on attending. We've kind of stayed away from the local GW just because the format has been a little bit different than a straight up format. But I'm looking forward to it, getting some new blood and hopefully getting them into our monthly meetups. We talked about rotating shops. And then my takeaway from the feedback I have here and then the feedback that I've received at the last night is when I show up to a meetup and play, it will be a Season 3 warband with the faction cards, because that'll give me two styles of play, right? Because typically those are broken up into aggro and objective. And it won't be as synergized where I can, dig and get through a bad hand. But the segue being is you're talking about the way that war bands are playing in Beastgrave. I think that'd be a good time to just kind of start talking about what we're liking at Beastgrave and kind of where the gameplay has gone. We touched on maybe Season 1 warbands struggling a little bit. But I mean, Jerod, what do you feel like? What are you liking about Beastgrave so far?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me that I really appreciate is the importance of the objective / feature tokens in the game. So for basically all of Season 1, and for most warbands in Season 2, you were not worried about the objectives.
That's a lie.
Well,
if your name was not Jason Murray, you were not worried about the objectives.
Yeah. It
or
seemed,
Randall Slate.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was objective play, don't get me wrong, but it seemed, from my perspective, that most warbands were looking for ways to score glory that did not require the objective tokens. And so for Season 1, that meant things like Change of Tactics and Master of War and Victory After Victory. And, and then that just compounded in Season 2, where you got things like Combination Strike and Great Gains and Solid Gains. And so all of these things that you could score glory by scoring other objectives that, didn't require you to be on an objective, and some of them didn't require you to make an attack, or if you had to make an attack, it didn't even necessarily need to be successful, and even if it needed to be successful, it didn't have to kill somebody. So now as we shift into Beastgrave, two of the warbands, the Gashrax Despoilers and the Grimwatch, have a surge objective that they can score immediately, where they get 2 glory for being on 3 objectives. So, and then there are other ones that are universal. So, you get a glory if you are on your if you're on an objective in your territory and you're on an objective in an opponent's territory. And there's an objective where you get glory if you have killed something and you're on 2 objectives. So, excuse me. I mean, I think that's my favorite thing. And I got a little bit of a taste of it playing Yiltharis, because they had the stand on all of the objectives in your territory and get 2 glory card. And they've got tricks to make that easier. But it's been interesting to watch people, locally and in the broader community, talk about the ploys that they want to take and the upgrades that they want to take, because they know they're going to be facing things. So like Mirror Move is the new hotness.
It was in my deck before Beastgrave.
So for anyone that's not familiar with Mirror Move,
sure.
it is a ploy that you play after a fighter is pushed. So let's say Jerod is attacking me and he drives back my fighter during the attack action. After that is done, I can then play Mirror Move and select a different fighter, any other fighter, whether it's mine or his, and push him as well.
Yep.
So a lot of counterplay through that Mirror Move card.
Because it counterplays up, push tech. So if you push me off an objective, I can play it to push one of your guys off of an objective. or if you play Countercharge, which is the one that says, when after an enemy fighter finishes the move action that is part of a charge action, choose a friendly fighter, push them up to 3 hexes. They must end adjacent. Well, you may have just pushed your beater into my face or push somebody in to get support while I can play mirror move and then push out. Or I can play mirror move and push one of my own fighters somewhere else. Or I could play mirror move and push one of your fighters through 2 lethal hexes because I get to push 3 hexes. So, and there are myriad cards that have appeared that people were not playing or had not considered for a long time that are coming up from that. So I think the objective token focus that is pretty prevalent with the first 3 warbands is my favorite thing. What about you, Trace?
My favorite thing is trying to figure out how to break all that you just said. So it's been a fun kind of exercise for me to try and figure out how to join or how to disrupt all those play styles. So because it has gone so objective focused, now I'm thinking more about, okay, well, the things that make all these warbands go for the most part are the movement, which the movement is a lot harder to just stop, right? Because you can't do a whole lot about that. But what you can do is you can potentially try and remove what they're trying to score, right? So I've come up with a couple ideas just about just objective removal, right? Yeah. Ways to reduce the number of objectives on the board to try and basically play a little bit of the Jerod tech, which is just the glory denial, right? So you're not trying to necessarily outscore your opponent through just sheer force, but you're trying to basically manipulate the board state to where you naturally will have more glory at the end of the game just because they can't score it. So things like Abyssoth's Unmaking, and people don't agree with me on this card, but I just really think that that new spell that they just released has some potential play in the right warband. I don't know if the right warband is out yet, but the one where you can do mass upheaval and flip all the objective tokens in one area to basically just lethal hexes, I think that has some fuel. It just may not have the proper cards to kind of support it right now. I just think with all the objectives in the game, things like that are in the game for a purpose, right? Yeah. And just finding the ways to make those work for you it's just been a fun mental exercise for me. So trying to figure out the counters to everything has been a fun part. I do like all the push. I think all the push tech has been a fun different change because it feels more tactical than just push my fighter forward and hope that I roll crits, right? So those are the things that I've really enjoyed. And I actually had a good time because Aman actually asked me to write an article for his blog for an older warband. And I kind of took one that I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but I thought it would be a fun exercise. And they've been not so great, which was the sepulchral. The sepulchral guard. Trying to figure out ways to use them in Beastgrave that are different. And everybody has opinions on it. So, of course, when we posted it on the blog, people had their ideas about, oh, that'll never work, so on and so forth. But every good deck has had somebody say, well, that'll never work. So the thing I was just trying to show people was that you can make a deck interesting and not be traditional with it. Yeah, anyway, so those are my favorite things. Just trying new things, trying to disrupt what people were going to want to do.
Yeah.
And I would be lying if I said that I wasn't making decks that were objective focused too. Like my Lady Heroes, the deck is all about objectives.
Yeah, but how powerful did Lady Heroes come? The no time card that stops all ploys, like just shuts down the power phase. It's such a powerful card now because of all the push. It's so good.
Yep. It's like they knew what they were doing. You know, and there's cards in there that I probably should switch around with. Less of the FU cards and more of the manipulating the board state cards, I think would be a good addition to that deck. It plays fine. I feel like it's got good beginnings, but I don't have it dialed in enough, and that's just going to come with playing with time. And I've kind of made a promise to myself to not mess with it until I've played X number of games, and then kind of I'll have more of an idea of how they play as a warband, and seeing what new objectives come out, because every time the new objectives come out, it changes, and like you're like, wow, that could be cool in the air, but you don't want to mess with it too early because then you skew your point of view and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So, what do you, in your counterplay, what do you think is the top warband that you think can have counterplay?
I think I personally think that Stormsire has a really, really good place, and Yilthari has a really good place, because Yilthari has natural objective removal just in faction.
Yep.
And then with Stormsire, they're 4-wound fighters, like you were talking about earlier, Jason, where they're not as easy to remove now because the damage is like the raw damage has gone down. And so it takes more time to remove those fighters. And all 3 of them are wizards. So like if you're relying on spells, they're a perfect example of what warband you would want to play with, because if you lose a fighter, you still have 2 wizards on the board, right? Yeah. So the magic focus for them, and there's so many good in-faction cards for them that don't require them to kill you. Like they can get their glory up while doing things to remove your opportunities for glory. So that's just kind of where my thoughts are with that. And yeah, I've posted the deck to you guys before in our chat, but I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it or not. But it's basically all like spell focused and trying to manipulate the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those 2 picks and where your head's at is kind of in line where mine is. Like I'm kind of the same focus of like, how can I not play into what everybody else is kind of doing? The push tech coming back. Season 1 I was a Procro Guard player, so like I played a lot of push tech, and it was the game, the mini game we talked a lot about. At Nova, was my mini game was to get the other person to play Great Concussion before I played Great Concussion, right? And that kind of mini game is back, like with Mirror Move. Like, it's like I need to disrupt your plan enough so you burn through your ploys, and then at turn 2 and 3, I now control the board state. And I think that you're like, your Cursebreaker deck I think has play, and but Athari's Guardians I've been playing with, like tinkering with the deck. It's hard though, because with both of those, and this is what GWs has done a really good job with, and this goes for all the seasons now in Beastgrave. So warbands from season 1, season 2, season 3, is you kind of got to commit to a play style. So if you're playing aggro, you have to kind of double down on those cards that are going to get you extra glory with aggro, the Amberbone Axe and the Trophy Hunter, Tome of Offerings, stuff like that, right? So If you're playing objectives, you got to double down on some pushes because people are going to come after you. But I do think that an area that has not been explored a lot in this game is the straight denial. And it's probably the hardest, in my opinion, because there's not a lot of good deck builds out there, and it's using a lot of fringe cards to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have our work cut out for us, but there's play there. And, much like you said, when you posted the article on hexes and warbands for the Sepulchral Guard, like, there's going to be people that shut it down. But we've always kind of stood by on this podcast that we play that fringe stuff. It's like what we like to do. So I'm interested to see what you come up with, and getting some games in on that denial, because Grimwatch guys, they're the real deal. So
Yeah.
I did not believe it. Like when you're just looking at the stat cards, I was like, what? They're 1-wound fighters. Like, okay, you just avoid the 2 heavy hitters, or are you like going and you kill the leader? But after playing with their ploys and their objectives, they can put up some glory real
Yeah.
quick.
Oh yeah, they can definitely bring the heat. But like when I started seeing all these people talking about like, oh well, Scrum's the greatest card because it's so easy to score, and you just have to basically some of these warbands just get it like from the jump, and I was just sitting there thinking to myself like, okay, so you're going to be clumped up. So how, like, what can I do to most maximize you being so close together, right? So then that's where I immediately started thinking about, okay, well, spells, yes, they can be mitigated with line of sight and stuff like that. But, we've already had this discussion of, yes, that winning boards is a crucial part of the game now. So if you win the board, if you're not playing objective focused, let them have 3 objectives, right? That way you get to dictate what the alignment of the board is. Right. And so they can't like lane block you. So they can't shut down your line of sight if you let them have their 3 objectives, Yeah,
and especially if they pick a bad board where you can place one of your objectives to block their objective placement.
Yep.
Like, and you got it like right almost on the line. So no, it's a great point.
So yes, you can deny line of sight with the way that the rules are now with the spells and range, and so the range in general is gone down a tick, but I think that having an understanding of what those other warbands want to do is just as important and that's actually the most important part of playing a denial deck. Like, you have to understand everybody else's deck more than you understand yours. And I think that that's what makes, and going back to like when I played Magic a long time ago, this has been years and years ago, I really liked playing like red and blue decks, which were denial decks, control decks mixed in with some damage. And that's kind of where my head's at for this season, because everything is going to be objective focused for the most part, and just trying to figure out how to make that work, but that's just me.
Yeah, and some people, like, I guess some people's opinions would be, like denial. So the deck that I took into Nova, Godsworn Hunt, I ran Oath of Denial. And a lot of the feedback that I received in playtesting was, you're only going to score denial once. Like, right? Like, it's 3 glory, so that'll probably win me 1 game. But everyone lost the purpose of that card. And the card was to play it game 1. So then game 2 and game 3, they came to me to deny denial.
Yep.
Right? So I think that those type of cards or objectives can build into this even more. And your point with board placement and giving people 3 objectives or taking board placement. There's a big metagame there that I don't think we've seen
Yep.
play out. Like Grimwatch will score and score quickly if you give them 3 objectives, but the worst thing is if you let them diagonal place you with board selection, they can cripple what you can do in their territory. Cripple it.
Yeah.
And they have that silly ploy that allows them to move like 10 spaces across the board to get an objective anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, with as fast as a lot of these warbands are that are objective focused, they're going to get where they want to go anyway. So make them play on your terms. That's just kind of where I've been thinking the past few. And that's, I've not played any of these decks or anything like that. It's all just theory at this point. But I do think that that's a good play style that we've not really seen yet.
Yeah. I mean, so speaking of play style, we have 3 new warbands. I don't know, Jerod, you've tinkered with Wild Hunt. Like any, Trace has too. Like, you guys have any insight onto what we think a good play style for Wild Hunt is for our newer listeners?
So I feel like the prevailing opinion is that they should be like super heavy aggro, and I think a lot of that is determined by the fact that their Inspire mechanic requires you to make charge actions. Yeah. And the way that I have played them is it tends to be more objective focused. And I can't keep straight, like, okay, clearly aggro is aggro, right? Like, I understand when somebody says an aggro deck, I understand what that means.
If you're holding objectives and attacking, it's known as flex.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think
flex is probably the way to go, so that and I think that you do that because the stats on the models lend themselves to that. So they're not super strong on the attack. They're not super strong on the defense, but they've all got decent movement. So you can kind of control your engagements because of the movement and the range. And then you can kind of do damage when you need to. I mean, what I've done is I built a deck that, uses the model characteristics to help me get objectives when I need to, and then uses upgrades for durability and accuracy, and then ploys to do damage. So, and that kind of gives me that flex that I need. So if somebody is coming in aggro, I've got accuracy when I need to hit, durability when I do get hit, but then movement to get around. And if somebody else is playing objective style, then I can go in, plink damage from range, play, like Lethal Ward or Encroaching Shadow or whatever to kind of dig damage down as needed. So I think
or just disrupt.
Yeah, or even disrupt. And then there's some push tech in there, of course, because it's Beastgrave. So of course there's some push tech.
And I think, like, just to reemphasize the point that you just made, because we're kind of getting into the next segment where we're talking about tactics and have a plan, and you just kind of touched on deck construction and segmenting your cards on, like, okay, so my objectives are going to be flex, my upgrades are going to be defensive style, and then you have your ploys, which are damage, right? So you're segmenting what cards you're looking for and the roles you want them to play, which I think is a great tips for, not saying that Wild Hunt, that's the way we should play them. There's still a lot of learning to do, but a great tip for, as you approach a new season and you approach deck construction, kind of what way do I want to play, tailor your objectives, and then what do you want your cards to do so you have redundancy within your gambits and ploys and redundancy within your upgrades. So, and Tracy, you've had success with the Wild Hunt too, so you just echo what Jerod says.
I think that they're the true, like, first real flex warband. Like, they're like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to get stronger as the expansion goes by, just because there are going to be so many things that are going to key off of the hunter keyword. So I think we will see them kind of rise through the ranks as the things go on. And this is all speculation, obviously, because but right now your cream of the crop for this expansion is Grimwatch, right? So what things need to happen to level them out? And I think the advantages that the hunt have are they have really high mobility, they have fairly consistent attacks, mid-range damage, and then they can spike damage really, really high, right? So you would have one, like, not all the time, but like once or twice, right? When you need it, those key rounds where you just need something to get removed from the board, they have the tools to do that, especially with like Jerod said, with some additional plink damage or whatever. You can definitely get those to pull off. Like an inspired attack is a great card to put into that deck because they're gonna want to be inspired anyway. And then when you inspire attack and then you charge with Skaith 5 hexes, and then he throws his hunting lance 3 hexes farther, that's a 8 hex threat range, which is crazy good. And he can just ruin your day with one attack.
And you could have the horn, so you get
with a reroll.
And reroll and got snare and pit trap in there, and
so I think that they have all the tools to be a truly flex warband.
Yeah, the most effective games that I've seen you guys play or I've watched online is like you kind of run away. Like you get up on glory, and because they have such a high movement, you just run the other way and say, okay, now come get me. And it can be menacing. And then against Grimwatch, their archer is no joke, especially with the upgrade that allows her to shoot twice. So, I don't think that, and once again, speculation here, folks, like, we just saw the Grand Clash over at Warhammer World where there was like 25, 28 players of Grimwatch. Like it was a huge portion of the field. You might be able to longboard them and then get some range fighters kind of stacked up in the center, like a lot of people used to play Mollog, and plink them off as they come back in. So
yeah, I think the thing for them is like if I'm making a deck for them, I'm wanting to find another way to get at least one other person with some range, right? So like cards like Seeking Stones are a great addition for them because with all the dodge warbands that are out right now, like they're you can put that on the hornblower, right, or on the guy that has cleave, and now they become all much more versatile. Just kind of leaning into that flex roll, right, where you can stay back and you can still plink damage if you need to, and then when somebody comes in, like you can charge with your fighters or get across the board because they're so fast. So.
Yeah. Good stuff. So kind of covered deck construction, wild hunts. Moving on to, I guess we can talk on the Grimwatch, and I'll be the first to admit, because they are the popular warband, they only received my attention to see what they can do. I have not really developed a playstyle, which is sad because this was the warband that I thought I would gravitate to in season 3. So what are you guys like initial impressions on Grimwatch? And I think the community has established the play style. So what else could we do to continue to whittle away at their potency? Jerod? Trace. Go ahead, Trace.
I think just trying to limit their mobility as much as you can is the thing, but they're also crazy fast.
They are.
The thing to remember with them is that they're not as efficient at moving as like the Nighthaunt warband is, right? So they're still only moving one fighter, or they might play a ploy that allows them to move another fighter or something like that. They're not as efficient as the others. So trying to like placing move tokens on people, like, you know, using transfixing stare, using stuff like that that places markers on those fighters and kind of either clogging lanes where they can't get to you. So like if they do diagonal you, try and get in there and get some extra tokens on them to where they have to like move fighters that they may not want to move, you know. You know, obviously that's going to be highly subjective and based on what you have in hand at the time, but you know, that's just something that you should potentially think about.
Yeah.
Jerod, you got the plan with your super optimized Uthari's deck.
Yeah.
Like, how did what are your insights in trying to limit them?
So, you know, the one thing that you pointed out was one that I was going to mention is that an inspired Uthari loves the little creepers.
Yep.
Because especially if she can get, you know, any kind of accuracy on whether that's Well of Power or Inspired Attack or you know, although I guess Inspired Attack doesn't work because it's not range 1. I keep trying to do stuff like that, but
like one card that came off the restricted list was Archer's Focus.
Yeah. So that's, but so she can, I mean, because when I played, I got longboarded, and so I just kind of parked Yothari in the middle and was able to attack, you know, several times because of the way that the Ghoul Call roll ended up. I was able to attack without having to move, and so, you know, I just got to roll glory. And I think I tallied it. I think by the time it was said and done, I had killed 6 total models, only 2 of which were not the Crypt Ghouls. So, and that's the other point that I want to make, is that if you can force your opponent to feed you Valreek, rhymes with Meek. Trace has already suffered that, and it's going to be a running theme now. It's just going to happen. Just let it happen.
It's fine.
Yeah. So, you know, if you can force them to feed you the bats or Gristlewell when they don't want to, or you can tempt them, you know, if you're a larger size warband. So let's say you throw out Grundon, for instance, if you're Godsworn. Well, he's 3 health. So, you know, they may not have Pit Trap or Snare, and well, Snare doesn't work for Gristlewell anyway. So, you know, they might have to throw out Gristlewell to take down your Grundon. Well, now they've pulled him out of position. So, I think strong ranged and forcing them to give you the non-Crypt Ghouls are going to be the ways to go, or you taking the non-Crypt Ghouls away from them, whether that's using Mirror Move, you know, after they push, or you plop a numpty on an objective and then you play the ploy that swaps people, so you can pull, you know, Gristlewell out of their deployment zone and throw one of your numpties into their deployment zone or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the target priority is huge for them. Like if your target priority is off, you're probably not going to win that game. But Yilthari with her nice little spell upgrade is money against them because she places a move token.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to like prevent them from doing certain things while you're trying to eat up your own objectives and score, reclaim the Lamentary and all that fun jazz, like just ways to try and disrupt their plan, right? And I think that's something that people just don't do. They focus so much on what they want to do that they don't try and think about how to prevent somebody else from doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
So Yuthari's what upgrade that places a move token?
So she has a spell attack action upgrade that is range 3, hits on focus, foci, and does 1 damage, but places a move token.
Yep. So she can plink you, and then she places a move token next to you. So like, you do that, and then you have another card like Transfixing Stare in there, where you place a move token, which is tech that people had because they were using it on Mollog, right?
Yep.
So it's not a foreign card. You play it on 2 fighters, and now you're dictating more of what you want your opponent to do than what they may want to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let them feed you those 2 wound fighters with 1 dodge, because in my one practice game that I did pilot them, Transfixing Stare shut my whole thing down. So it was against a 3 model warband with 4 wounds, right? And we'll just leave it at that. But like, I had a combo set up where Griswold was gonna, take a shot at 1, and then the next activation sprint across the board, and it was totally disrupted. Did I still get to take 1 out? Yes, but it was just 1 instead of 2 with Transfixing Stare. And if you can get the Duke to burn Ghoul Call, like an action itself without the muster, like by itself, like you're now they're at 11 activations, right? So that's big. Just they're super fast and they're super objective focused. So where they're going to be. Like, they're going to be coming up in the corners of the board on the Ghoul Call, and they're going to be coming after those objectives. So cool. Anything else, or hopefully we can beat the fleshy courts of the meek. I don't know. I don't get that reference. So
it's a Game of Thrones reference. And we all know you're illiterate, so
I am. What's reading? So,
I think the thing just to remember is that, like, Grimwatch are here, and they're going to be what the measuring stick probably for the expansion. So
they're the new Mollog.
I don't know that I would go that far. Not because they're not meta defining, but like they don't create a negative play experience like Mollog does. Because you can still technically interact with them much more than you can with Mollog.
Fair.
So, Mollog, if you're not prepared for Mollog, like, you're just like, holy shit. Like, what do I do with this giant monstrosity that's just come in and beat my face off for the entire round? The Grimwatch, they can still hit you and hit you hard, but their main goal is not to do that. They're going to be doing that to try and supplement their income, not their only source of income.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
It just comes down to that you're going to have to tech against this warband for the whole season, which much like the Mollog. So,
I think it's also that you are going to have to tech just for objective play in general, and there's 3 7 model warbands that do that fairly well.
Yeah, true. The last warband that we haven't touched on yet is the Despoilers. The Goat Boys. My favorite warband of season 3, and I truly think that, I know you guys said about the Wild Hunt, but I believe that I can play a flex warband with the Despoilers that will be dicey, to put it bluntly. It really will be
like literally dicey.
Literally dicey. It's going to depend a lot on the dice roll. But I know that I can put up a lot of glory. I played a practice game with the deck, and I scored 17 glory, and I did not land a single attack action.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty good.
The dream. That's the dream.
So there's play there, but so here, like, with them, it's almost like doubling down on the push tech and the objectives, because they have a lot of objectives. And to go back to Jared's point on deck construction, like, I have my objectives, which are mainly objective play. There's that one where you play 3 ploys and stuff, like in-faction things that are really potent for them.
Sure.
But it's a lot of objective play. And then my gambits are a lot of push tech. And I think that really is going to be the theme for me in season 3, is like, I've always loved push tech. And when you talk about pushing now, like, for the players that are still adapting to this new state of the game, just think of push as movement. We were so reliant on hidden
free
paths.
movement.
Yeah, we were so reliant on hidden paths. We were so reliant on spectral wings. Those cards, although they don't exist, they still do exist within the push cards. It sucks because now everybody has push cards, so you move one step forward and they move 2 steps back. So, but then my upgrade deck, like you have Tome of Offerings, the In-Faction Glory, and then the Amber Axe. So if I can double down, triple down on those, like I'm going to be eating glory through kills.
Right.
Yeah, that's where my head was at, actually, is putting all 3 of those extra glory upgrades in there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and you have the built-in faction reroll, right? So if you kill a fighter, and like I said, I was able to shenanigans my way against Jimmy, which is a very reputable player, like and score 17 glory without killing anything, and really I don't think I hit an attack the entire game. But if it had snowball, then I'd land a couple attacks. Their biggest downside to me is their inspired mechanic. Having to kill 2 fighters typically will not happen in turn 1. Maybe if you're playing against a large warband, you can pull that off. But that would mean that you're probably risking your leader to get that done. And I don't know if I'm willing to do that turn 1.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where, Tracy, you have some thoughts on the warband too. So, anything different from that?
Not really. I think that their playstyle lends a lot of the same, tactics as you would approach like a Skates Wild Hunt, right? So they have some really strong like in-faction objectives that are not difficult to score. Anytime that you can just step your foot on 3 objectives and score 2 glory just as an immediate score is great, especially with all the pushes that we have in the game right now. It's not a hard thing to do. I'm not going to say it's an easy thing to do, but it's not a difficult. If you have just enough cards in your hand and the right actions performed, you can score 6 glory just from, moving 2 fighters, right? I just think that there's some really strong play there. But then to complement that, you have some pretty hefty fighters in the leader for them. I think that he's not like an on the surface great caster, but he can be a great caster. Just because of the way that he starts at 1. He starts at 1 wizard level and goes to 2. So if you tech for extra wizarding levels, if you put on your sorting hat and you figure out which house you're supposed to belong to, like you can definitely make him pretty beefy.
You could be rolling 4 magic dice with an in-faction reroll just for magic dice.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Kind of like my non-competitive build, I'd love to pull that off. It's so fun.
Yeah. I'm not saying that you build your entire strategy around just Gashrak. But I think between him and the Bestigor fighter who hits for 3 damage just out of the box, like
he's a Doom Bull.
Sure.
Doom Bull. Yep. That's the one. I think that those 2 fighters, if you protect them, and people are going to know that you're going to want to try and protect them, so they're going to try and gun after them first, obviously. But you can definitely make it to where you could have 3 fighters that have multiple glory upgrades on them, or you could put it all on what's his name, and every time that you kill somebody, you get 4 glory. Or one time you get 4 glory.
Yeah, but one time you burn. Yeah.
but then you would get 3 glory every other time, which could be just crazy. But it's not like Malog where you have where you can activate a billion times and just smash a bunch of different fighters with the same fighter. So you have to be more selective. But
yeah.
But yes, I think that you are on the right path with them, just like with Skaith, right? You just want to play to what the opponent gives you. Don't not as much trying to do one specific thing.
Yeah, and that huge point there to our listeners, when you go to large count warbands, you really have to look at your matchup, and deployment becomes very crucial. Those 2 heavy hitters against a, like a Gitz or something, you might play them very aggressively and get them into the other territory and kind of just start mowing things down. But if you misdeploy with, somebody that's hitting for 3 damage right off the bat, or, a Jagathra or a Skaith coming in and pushing you and killing you with 3 wounds, like, it could be very crippling. So deployment is crucial with the large war bands. The other piece of advice I'll give people for the goats is calculated risk is a very, very popular card. When you're playing with large warbands, especially 2 wound fighters that you want to hold objectives, be very calculated if you use them to run through, because the plink damage is real. So was it Lethal Ward and Encroaching Shadow are going to see a lot of play, and nothing would be more disheartening as burning an activation. And yes, you'd get the glory for calculated risk, but disrupting your plan to control 3 objectives, you really have to select who you're taking that wound on. So
hopefully it's somebody with Crown of Avarice equipped.
Right?
Yep.
Yes. So Crown of Avarice. Oh, I love the. That leads us to there's 2 more points that I want to bring up, and before we get to our favorite cards, right? So that'll be how we close it out. I think we'd be remiss, and we'll probably get a little pushback, because we've talked about the but the lethality of the game has changed from just straight damage to whether that's a card, a ploy that's doing damage after the attack or during the attack. But there's also this new mechanic where we place lethal hexes, and it's really, really upped the lethality in certain cases. So I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on how do you avoid the lethals, and what are your thoughts when placing them? So
hug the lethals, love the lethals.
No. So I think for me, the one thing that I've learned is if you have chosen a board that has 2 starting hexes that are adjacent, and you really want to use at least one of them, then when it's your turn to place an objective behind one of them. And that way your opponent cannot place the lethal hex so that it is behind both of them.
Right.
Because as soon as you do that, especially if you're playing like a 7-fighter warband where you have to use all the starting hexes, you're now in a position where if you're not careful, you could lose 2 fighters from a 1 damage attack because of the push into the lethal hex. So, calculated.
So, for example, Shrine of the Silent People or the Living Rock, which are 2 new boards in the new Beastgrave, both have 2 adjacent hexes that are on an edge. So that could be really bad, is what you're telling me.
Right. That is correct. Yep. It could so happen that you're playing the Condemners and the Bestigor comes in and does 3 damage and then pushes you into a lethal hex that you didn't expect to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like you've lived that one.
Yep. So, but with that in mind, the other piece that I would add is that calculated risk is I think, is an easy card to add because it's easy to score, but you need to make sure that it lines up with everything else that you're trying to do when you put it in your deck.
Correct. Which is just a good point altogether about just deck construction in general, which is understand what your warband does well and often double down on what they do well. So like find cards that synergize well with the faction cards, because especially with the new way that decks are constructed with the 3 restricted cards as opposed to the 5 that we've been used to for so long, those in faction cards are going to be even more important, because just find things that they do well, and the cards give you a good hint, right? Like moving for some cards where they're like, move through this, move 6 hexes, right? Okay, well that means that I should probably put some movement upgrades in my deck, right? So those are obviously pretty broad statements, but for those who are just starting out, that's just a good tip in general. Just look at whatever faction that you want to play, look what they do well, or like understand that their faction cards are there for a reason, and that's how they've been designed to play. And you can always like break how they're designed to play, which we all do to some degree, but basically my point is just try and play to their strengths as much as you can, and the best way to do that is just look at what the faction cards do.
Great point. For me, for the lethal, it does increase lethality. I've been using some upgrades that ignore lethal hexes now, which I don't think I ever would have touched in Season 2, especially with my Gits deck. I love when Snurk spins into a lethal, so I make sure that I have the Greaves on so he ignores it. But also, yeah, right. Also, there's a little metagame going on with the lethals, and it really your board, whether you place first or you choose to dictate layout, right? So something else to think about. And then remember, 2 lethal hexes cannot touch. So to Jerod's point, if you're going to pick a very aggressive board layout where you have some things that are right up front and center, and your opponent's just waiting to plop that lethal hex right behind one of those starting hexes, don't be afraid to put the lethal in your own board in a position where you're not going to get pushed into it, and then blocking those 2 hexes or 3 hexes where they would ideally like to place theirs. And then that opens up some board selections for you to still run calculated risk, and not have to take one of the predetermined lethal hexes. So
also, you could just play ghosts and just ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that too. That's the great set of the way the game is now with this many warbands. I mean, we'll be up to 26 by the time the season's done.
Yeah.
And they all have different flavor and different ways of playing. So yeah, the ghost, you could, if you don't like lethal hexes and you just I don't care, and if I'm playing against ghost, I may not place a lethal hex, because they don't care. It's only going to hurt me. So forget it. But yeah, a lot of different ways to play. So that's our little thoughts on lethal hexes. Yeah, they're there to stay. They do add damage into the game. The other thing to remember too is the damage is done after the attack, so a lot of objectives will not actually trigger on a fighter being killed by a lethal. There are some that do, but some that do not. So if your warband has to do the damage for an objective to trigger, that lethal is not part of your warband. So in closing on Beastgrave and having a plan and all this wonderful stuff that we've talked about today, what are some of your new favorite cards? And we'll say, what are your 2 favorite cards that have kind of creeped up into your decks or your thoughts, Trace?
Are we talking about faction specific, or are we talking about?
Could be anything. Any 2 cards that you think are just like the cat's pajamas, or hey, give a second look.
I really love Chilling Scream.
So what is Chilling Scream?
So Chilling Scream is a faction-specific card for Lady Heroes Mournflight that basically turns off your opponent's power phase for a turn. So it basically says you play this card during your power step, your opponent cannot play power cards. So that means that for one power phase, so like if you have a crucial power step that you really need to try and get some stuff taken care of and get done, or if you're just playing kind of the guessing game and thinking, okay, well I think that they're about to start trying to do this thing, right? You play that card and they can't play power cards for that step. So you're delaying their plan, which is kind of something we touched on earlier, which is trying to not just play your game, but trying to disrupt your opponent's game too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. The other that I think it was not overlooked to begin with, but I think people just don't understand the real power of it in the current state of the game, and that's Coveted Prize, which is the new objective where it's the objective card where all objectives are held. It does not dictate who has to hold those objectives. So if you're playing against someone who wants to play objective heavy, then, and with just the way that the cards are designed now, people are going to try and get on objectives for at least a turn, right? So if you can get to a point where everybody's on an objective at the end of the phase, you get 3 glory, which is huge.
Yep.
And that can be in any combination, right? So even if they score supremacy, you're like, okay, cool, I got 3 glory too, because I'm on 2 objectives and you're on 3 objectives. So it's just a good way to, again, try and lean into that counter game where you're like, okay, well, you did the thing, but you're not any farther ahead of me than you were before.
Yeah, so. And Path to Glory, like just to tie into that, Path to Glory, I think is going to be a card that, or Path to Victory, sorry.
Yeah.
Is going to be a card that a lot of people play, and that one is one of those and if cards, or and also, where they have to hold 2 objectives in their own territory and kill a fighter. But like, so if you have the 3 objectives, there are a lot of people are going to claim at least 2 to get that. So your point is extremely valid that card is on the come up.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. No. Jerod, to you.
So one that I have started playing with that I had not played with a bunch before Season 2 is Springseed Step. So this is a faction-specific ploy for Yelthari's Guardians, and it's a reaction. Play this after a friendly fighter's move action. Choose another friendly fighter and push them up to 3 hexes. They must end this push adjacent to the fighter that moved. So it gives you kind of additional mobility if you are trying to get to where you can engage without having to do a move action to get there. So if you need to get Onslaned where she can shoot, or Yelthari where she can shoot or cast a spell, it's good for that. And then you still don't have a move token, so in subsequent activations you could still run away as needed. So that's one. And we've talked at length about the value of push tech, so you could also use it if you need to charge next to you could charge next to an objective and then push a fighter onto an objective. So I've just found that one interesting and useful. And then I think probably, excuse me, my favorite card that we've seen come out of Beastgrave is Hunt's End, which is the Skaith's Wild Hunt faction-specific hybrid objective. So you can score it. You get 2 glory in an end phase if either you take a fighter with a wounds characteristic of 4 or more out of action, or you hold 3 or more objectives. So it's our only way out, or an end phase worthy kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So but the concept of the hybrid objective, I think, is what makes it my favorite card. That there will hopefully continue to be cards where there are two different ways to score it, which just settles into that like flex play style that seems to be coming up.
I would agree.
Yeah. So what about you, Jason?
Well, I'm going deep, and I'm very, very glad that you guys have all picked faction cards. So I'm not going to say that my two selections are going to define any championships, but I think they're two cards that I would like to incorporate into my playing, and more importantly, one of them is for Godsworn Hunt. So Godsworn Hunt will continue to be my favorite warband. I just love the models. They forced me to play aggro, which I am not good at doing. But they took a hit with Last Chance coming out, Rebound coming out, and I'm always trying to find a way with Godsworn Hunt just to make one of your attacks not matter. If I can get you to miss one attack, I feel that I have a really, really good chance of winning. So my card from Godsworn is Withering Charm. And it's like when exactly one damage would be caused to this fighter does not suffer that damage. So that negates all of the push, like pit trap, right? Like, because it's after. So that would be one damage after the attack, right? So does not happen. You push me into a lethal, does not happen. You encroaching shadow to me, does not happen. You lethal warbing, does not happen. Like, it is such a good card, so it will negate that one damage. Now it's just one, but typically that's one that you're trying to get on one of my 3-wound fighters to kill me. And then when this happens, so when I negate it, I roll a dice, and then if I roll a shield, it stays with the fighter. So with all the plink damage rolling around, and it's probably the 11th card in a deck, so maybe it comes out. But I just think it's really, really cool because with all the plink damage that's out there, man, just get out of here.
Yep.
And then that takes me to my next one and staying on the same theme. So with Grimwatch out there, a vast majority of their fighters doing 1 damage. We talked about Wild Hunt and their archer, and we talk about the javelin. You know, my own favorite fighter of all time, Jagathra, with a javelin. And I'm sure we'll see other 1 damage fighters out there. We got a ton of the goats with 1 damage. Base attacks is reinforced armor. And this is a card that came out in Night Vault, and I don't think got any play. There was some talk of it, but I didn't see anyone really play it. And it reads, this fighter takes no damage from an attack action with a damage characteristic of 1, but in italics it says before modifiers. So if that attack is jazzed up, right? Like they have great strength on it, or they have the Jagathra's +1 on a charge, or Skaith's +1 on a charge, right? That it negates the attack. And the only way that you get by it is unless the result is a critical hit. So they still have a chance, but I still got my defense roll too. So I just think it really could help if Grimwatch ever do decide to attack me, or if Farstriders come back into the game.
Yeah.
I think it's just cool. So.
Yeah, agreed. It's a good pick.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. I think that's our coverage of where we stand with Underworlds currently in building the Raleigh play group. So once again, be on the lookout for the meetup coming up hopefully November 14th. And then, seats are limited at GW Pinecrest Point for the upcoming Glass tournament. There is Mace going on in this month too, which is down in Charlotte, which a friend of the show, Brandon's running. I did see a tournament coming up in Virginia as well, and I forget the shop's name. So there are events out there. Get out there to participate. And we're going to end with this. With all these events coming up, did we see the raffle to make it to Nova next year? And how excited are you? Our raffle.
So excited.
I just think it's cool that even us that can only attend one Grand Clash a year, which is Nova, will have the opportunity to hopefully get there. So,
yeah, I agree. I think that it's not a perfect system, obviously, but because I think there are some people who worry that it's potentially going to cause negative experiences and more of a win at all costs kind of approach to the game. But to that, like, if you're going to play in a tournament, like, you're already kind of wanting to play that way anyway, or at least wanting to be competitive. So I think it's great to give the people that play in those local tournaments a lot but don't get a chance to maybe go to a larger convention. I think it's great to give them at least a shot at going,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, cool, guys. Thanks for that. We're going to take a break here, and we'll come back and close out the show.
And we're back, and that'll wrap us up for our 16th episode. So thanks for listening. As always, we appreciate the time that everyone takes to listen. We'll do the business. So, give us the likes and follows. We're on Twitter, Battle Mallet 1. We're on Instagram, Battle Mallet PCast. We're on Facebook, Battle Mallet Podcast. And if you can give us stars and reviews on Facebook and iTunes, that'll hit their algorithms so that other people can find us more organically. And as always, we appreciate, word of mouth as that goes out as well. If you have feedback, we'd love to hear it. So shoot us a message on Facebook or on Twitter. Like and comment our stuff as it gets posted. But for I think that rounds us out. So we'll try to put some links to the events that Jason referenced earlier in the show notes. So be sure to check those out. But I think that rounds us out. So for the Battle Mallet Podcast, we are 3 dads and an almost homeowner who isn't here.
Homie.
I like it. So this is Jerod signing out.
This is Trey signing out. Kill those objectives.
And I'm Jason, very grateful for our supporting spouses to allow us to go to a flex schedule to grow the community of Warhammer Underworlds. Table New Murray.
That's a really long handle.
Wow.
Get the hell out of here. Peace.
The Battle Mallet Podcast is protected under the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find more information via links on podcast.battle-mallet.com. Music by Anno Domini Beats.
Picture.
Snorkel.
Mike Wazowski.
Cereal bowl.
Chick-fil-A.
Laundry basket.
Book bag.
Silly putty.
Soda can.
Damn it, that was mine.
This is what the whole episode should be.